Once a Hollywood golden child, Mel Gibson gained popularity with legendary roles and blockbuster successes. But behind the camera, a slew of startling events brought his career to a sharp stop. From Academy Award-winning filmmaker to public disgrace, how did one of the biggest names in Hollywood fall? More significantly, can he ever really recover his legacy? Join us as we examine Mel Gibson's ascent, fall, and possible atonement closely. Early years in Hollywood. Mel Gibson's road to fame started with his breakthrough parts in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Initially, he became well known abroad for playing Max Rokatansky in George Miller's dystopian movie, Mad Max. The popularity of Mad Max brought him international recognition and introduced him as a new and powerful talent, capable of carrying intricate, action-packed stories. Still, it wasn't only Mad Max that confirmed his position in Hollywood. Shortly thereafter, Gibson starred in Gallipoli, a historical drama showing the terrible effects of World War I on Australian soldiers. Critics praised him for his performance as Frank Dunn, a soldier caught between survival and allegiance, proving that his acting ability went beyond roles of action hero, rounding out Gibson's early career as one distinguished by flexibility and intensity. The movie highlighted his capacity to communicate great passion and sensitivity. Gibson kept assuming jobs that accentuated his acting versatility as the 1980s developed. While his work in more serious material, such as The Year of Living Dangerously, demonstrated his ability to mix physicality with emotional depth. The Mad Max successors, especially The Road Warrior, 1981, further confirmed his status as a leading man in action films. Gibson had become a great Hollywood celebrity by the middle of the 1980s. Having first been a gifted young actor, both in Hollywood and abroad, his attractive appearance mixed with his indisputable talent made him a sought-after figure. As Gibson's star continues to rise, his public persona evolved alongside his growing fame and success. Gibson was much praised in these early years for his charm, mystery, and on-screen physical presence. Audiences and reviewers both noticed his magnetic appeal. Off-screen, Gibson's mysterious demeanor just enhanced his attraction. In interviews, he exuded humility and timidity that contrasted with the bold, often rebellious figures he played on movies. The public was enthralled by this duality between the man and the actor. Gibson was also sometimes referred to as a man's man, drawing in both sexes. While his ability to access a deeper emotional reserve won him acclaim as a major actor, his tough, good looks and dominating screen presence made him a perfect choice for action movies. He was essentially able to occupy the space of a sophisticated dramatic actor, as well as the conventional Hollywood action hero, therefore balancing his appeal. His dislike of the usual Hollywood gloss and glamour also helped to define his public persona. He seemed to avoid too much media coverage and chose a more private existence instead, which won him over followers who considered him as more grounded than other stars of similar size. As Gibson's fame grew, so did his reputation as a serious and versatile actor in Hollywood. Mel Gibson was an established A-list actor by the middle of the 1980s, not only a budding star. His roles in big box office successes like Lethal Weapon drove him to the elite of Hollywood. For Gibson especially, the Lethal Weapon series changed everything, since his performance of Martin Riggs, a disturbed but extremely talented police officer, became legendary. Audiences linked with Riggs' emotional challenges as much as they did with the intense action scenes. Gibson's performance was praised for its depth and intensity. This position signaled the start of a new period in his career whereby he was not just a starring man, but also a worldwide star, able to attract sizable audiences to venues. Apart from his financial success, Gibson started to get more importance inside the movie business itself. Directors and producers saw he could carry both provocative dramas and action-packed blockbusters, which presented a range of fresh chances for him. Gibson was positioned as one of the most bankable stars of the 1980s by the mix of his critical and box office popularity. Gibson's trip was barely starting as the following phase loomed huge, although his place was solidly secured in Hollywood. Peak of his career. Mel Gibson made an audacious choice to develop his skills behind the camera, moving into the directorial post while his actor career shot off, with Braveheart, an epic historical drama in which he both directed and performed. His first significant triumph in this role occurred both monetarily and critically. The film, which chronicles the struggles of Scottish hero William Wallace for the independence from England, was an enormous hit. Gibson's twin roles as star and director of the movie let him bring his vision and enthusiasm to the production, so producing a cinematic masterwork that really connected with viewers. Braveheart then went on to win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Gibson, so firmly establishing him as a force to be reckoned with in Hollywood, not only as an actor, but also as a visionary director. The film's emotional depth, broad fighting sequences, and Gibson's captivating performance as Wallace helped to explain its long influence on the business, showcasing his abilities to lead both front of and behind the camera. Braveheart became for many the height of Gibson's career at the time. Building on the popularity of Braveheart, Gibson directed The Passion of the Christ in 2004, a film showing the last hours of Jesus Christ's life in graphic and frequently horrific accuracy. Although the movie was a box office success, generating more than $600 million globally, its uncompromising portrayal of violence and charges of anti-Semitism caused great debate. Notwithstanding criticism, The Passion of the Christ solidified Gibson's image as a fearless director, ready to explore challenges and provocative themes. The popularity of the movie also demonstrated Gibson's capacity to appeal to a worldwide audience, especially religious viewers who hailed its spiritual relevance. As Gibson balanced claim and controversy as a director, his legacy as a Hollywood heavyweight continued to grow. Mel Gibson was unquestionably a Hollywood A-lister throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Unlike many of his predecessors, he was able to negotiate between being an action hero and a director of very personal and sophisticated movies. Movies including Braveheart and The Patriot confirmed his reputation as amongst Hollywood's most bankable performers. Another historical epic that fit Gibson's themes of sacrifice and heroism, which had become a trademark of his films, was The Patriot, widely hailed for his performance as Benjamin Martin, a reluctant hero in the American Revolution. His connections with characters that reflect strength, bravery, and moral complexity grew. Gibson became almost mythological in Hollywood during this period since he got connected with blockbuster movies. He was a brand, not merely a leading man. His name alone drew big audiences to theaters, and his movies were frequently associated with big, high-production value storytelling. His venture into directing also let him more broadly alter Hollywood stories. Projects like Braveheart and The Passion of the Christ helped Gibson establish himself as a director with a unique style, frequently defined by themes of redemption, suffering, and personal bravery. Gibson's impact went beyond his particular creations. He became well known for shows that were unreservedly brave and ambitious as an actor and director, therefore influencing the way Hollywood produced tales. Whether via the raw violence seen in Passion of the Christ or the great realism of his war sequences in Braveheart, he regularly stretched the bounds of traditional narrative. This audacity and his ability to regularly produce commercial hits confirmed his reputation as a Hollywood star able to mix broad appeal with artistic skill. As Gibson's career reached its peak, his choices and projects continued to challenge both the industry and audiences. Beyond his personal achievement, Mel Gibson was instrumental in determining how Hollywood approached historical epics and religious-themed movies. Reflecting his own interests and views, his undertakings were frequently deeply ingrained in historical or spiritual relevance. By means of Braveheart, he restored the historical epic genre, therefore opening the path for additional major productions such as Kingdom of Heaven and Gladiator, by demonstrating that such films might be both commercially feasible and culturally significant. His work on The Passion of the Christ similarly opened the door for more clearly religious films to be taken seriously by both audiences and Hollywood executives. Furthermore notable about Gibson's works were their genuineness and meticulous attention to detail. For instance, the choice to employ ancient languages including Hebrew, Latin, and Aramaic in The Passion of the Christ gave spectators a realistic resonance. Even if it meant going beyond the boundaries of traditional filmmaking, his dedication to historical and cultural correctness strengthened his image as a director ready to take chances to realize his vision. As Gibson moved forward, the challenges he faced would reveal the complex reality of sustaining such a legacy. The fall from grace. Following a string of public controversies that seriously tarnished Mel Gibson's reputation, his extraordinary career underwent an abrupt and sharp collapse in the mid-2000s. Gibson was detained for driving under the influence in Malibu, which set off the first significant incident in July 2006. Although the DUI itself was detrimental, his other actions caused his quick slide from popularity. Claiming, "Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world," Gibson set out an anti-Semitic tirade during the arrest. Made in a drunken flash, this startling comment set off instant indignation. The media grabbed at the narrative, headlines and news sources highlighting Gibson's comments. Because Gibson's earlier work, particularly The Passion of the Christ, seemed to have religious overtones, this event particularly resonated with me. Many detractors went back over the movie, noting how Jewish characters were portrayed as troublesome and suggesting anti-Semitic overtones. Gibson, who had earlier had quite a reserved and guarded image, suddenly came under close examination, with broad criticism from Jewish organizations, civil rights groups, and supporters, who had earlier adored him. The public reaction was clearly unfavorable. Gibson promptly apologized publicly, but his reputation suffered greatly, even if he attributed his outbursts on a protracted battle with alcoholism. The apologies had no effect to calm the outcry, since many thought that they were inadequate or fake. Rather than seen as a one-off occurrence, the DUI arrest and the anti-Semitic outburst seemed to expose more sinister sides of Gibson's personality. He changed overnight from one of Hollywood's most bankable stars to someone deemed very contentious. The crisis did not stop there. Over custody of their daughter, Gibson engaged in a highly public and acrimonious legal dispute with his then-girlfriend, Oksana Grigorieva, 2010. A number of audio recordings containing extremely racist and sexist comments were released to the media. During this conflict, in which Gibson could be heard making not only used racial epithets, but also made aggressive threats against Grigorieva in these videos, therefore further damaging his reputation. The public's reaction to these tapes was one of shock and revulsion. Gibson's already precarious reputation looked to fall even more. Anti-Semitic, racist, and misogynist remarks turned off a lot of his fan base and left Hollywood wondering if Gibson could ever bounce back. As these controversies continued to pile up, Gibson's once glittering career began to unravel under the weight of public and industry condemnation. These debates had quick and terrible effects on Gibson's career. Once honoring Gibson as a gifted actor and filmmaker, Hollywood started separating himself from him. Faced with possible criticism, studios began to cut links with him and surreptitiously shelve projects he had been working on. Gibson was blacklisted in a field where financing and roles depend much on reputation. Studios and filmmakers were reluctant to work with someone whose name had grown to be connected with controversy. Not a guaranteed box office draw. Several of Gibson's well-publicized initiatives fell apart right away, among other significant repercussions. After Gibson's 2006 DUI arrest and public indignation followed, Icon Productions, his production firm, battled to remain relevant. Deals that had been in works were discreetly dropped, and chances Gibson, an actor and filmmaker, had formerly had abound started to vanish. Many of the well-known directors and actresses started publicly separating themselves from Gibson, either having worked with him or liked him before. One of many people who denounced Gibson's comments, Steven Spielberg, for instance, was blacklisted by certain Jewish Hollywood executives and producers based on rumors. Gibson's ability to land front stage in big movies suffered as well, whereas in the 1990s and early 2000s, he had been a bankable leading actor. The controversies made him radioactive to many big studios. Gibson discovered that he was deprived of roles that would have otherwise been custom-made for him, as producers refused to risk on a figure that had grown to be so profoundly polarizing. Furthermore, his position as director grew equally delicate. Securing financing for such projects became more challenging, since no studio wanted to be connected to bad coverage his participation would generate. Gibson's fall from favor was not just a matter of public opinion. Hollywood's response was swift and decisive, signaling a near-complete professional exile. The response of Hollywood upon Gibson's collapse was one of general rejection. Important players in the business quickly turned away from the troubled celebrity as controversies developed. While others gave wary support, many of Gibson's longtime friends and allies decided to keep quiet or publicly denounce his behavior. Once rivals vying for his business, studios now withdrew from any possible projects containing his name, therefore blacklisting him from mainstream Hollywood. Not just studio chiefs and producers, but actors, directors, and screenwriters also avoided any connection to Gibson because they thought it would jeopardize their own careers. Gibson's slide from grace was covered relentlessly in the media. Media outlets including mainstream media, entertainment news sources, and tabloid magazines grabbed on the chance to cover every fresh aspect of his scandals. This continuous inspection simply helped to accentuate Gibson's bad reputation, effectively isolating him. The very business that had once honored him now seemed driven to keep as far from him as possible. Although some popular personalities, such as actor Robert Downey Jr., would finally speak out in support of Gibson, advocating pardon and a path at atonement, the general response in Hollywood was to discount him, finding Gibson left out of big film festivals, award ceremonies, and other gatherings that had once welcomed him with open arms, made his exile from the business brutally evident. His reputation as a Hollywood legend had collapsed to a story of scandal, guilt, and seclusion. With his professional career in tatters, Gibson faced the difficult reality of navigating a Hollywood landscape that had largely closed its doors to him. The confession. Following many public controversies and a damaged reputation, Mel Gibson finally made a much-awaited confession that attracted a lot of public and media attention together. The confession itself did not occur all at once, but rather fit a larger story in which Gibson started to openly confront his prior actions. One of the most memorable events occurred during a 2016 interview with Variety, in which he frankly discussed his historic DUI arrest, anti-Semitic comments, and the aftermath that had basically ended his career. Gibson's confession stemmed from a recognition of his prior behavior, especially the very nasty remarks he had made after his DUI arrest and the tapes that have come to light in his court fight with Oksana Grigorieva, admitting that he had said some things that were horrible and noting the suffering his remarks had caused many populations, particularly the Jewish community. He expressed regret and shame for his behavior. Gibson alluded to his battles with alcohol and personal demons, therefore portraying his outbursts as a product of such conflicts rather than firmly held convictions. He said that time of his life was a low point and suggested he had since fought to emotionally and psychologically repair himself. Though not presented as a formal apology, the interview was perceived as Gibson's attempt to atonement and explanation of the events leading to his collapse. Though it blended with an air of exasperation over how long his misdeeds had tormented him, his tone became one of repentance. In some ways, Gibson sounded sincerely regretful, but also a little annoyed that his name still strongly associated with these issues 10 years later. Despite his confession, the public's reaction to Gibson's confession was split. Some felt his statement of contrition and acknowledgement of wrongdoing to be honest and deserving of pardon. The group cited Gibson's candid admission of his drinking and the actions he had made towards recovery as proof he had grown from his errors and was striving for development. These fans, which included some well-known Hollywood celebrities, felt Gibson should be given another shot and be allowed to reconstruct his career. Many, though, were still dubious about Gibson's confession. Critics felt his apology lacked nuance and failed to adequately convey the gravity of his activities. They claimed that his acknowledgement came too late, and his past actions spoke to well-rooted prejudices difficult to eradicate with a public declaration. Others felt Gibson's emphasis on his personal challenges and his career suffered. Others felt Gibson's emphasis on his personal challenges and the loss his career suffered diverted attention from the damage his words had done to underprivileged communities. The confession looked more to these people than a sincere expression of contrition. It seemed more like an attempt to mend his professional image. Media coverage of Gibson's confession matched these conflicting responses. While some sources described the interview as a road towards atonement, others questioned whether Gibson was really regretful or merely staging a comeback. The uproar around his confession mirrored the larger social discussion on whether famous personalities who have committed major crimes can ever atone for their deeds and re-enter the public scene. As reactions to the confession unfolded, it became clear that many were still grappling with how to interpret Gibson's words and whether they signaled real change. To completely grasp the significance and impact of Mel Gibson's confession, it is crucial to study not just the content of his words, but also the environment in which they were delivered. Gibson's confession was essentially an attempt to publicly face his actions and explain the elements causing his declining spiral. The tone of the confession, however, begs serious issues regarding its genuineness and whether to express sincere regret or an attempt to deflect responsibility from him. Gibson's confession was notable for its focus on drunkenness and personal problems as influencing elements of his actions. While this explanation was obviously credible, it also established a narrative in which Gibson could remove himself from the harsh words he made. Gibson positioned himself as someone who had lost control due to outside events rather than someone with strongly negative opinions, by characterizing his acts as the result of his addiction. This difference is crucial since it relates to whether Gibson's confession was essentially an apology or an attempt to defend his prior behavior. Gibson's confession looked much more introspective than contrite. Although he admitted the damage he had done, he didn't really interact with the particular sufferings his comments had caused the Black and Jewish communities that endured. His concentration on his own personal recovery eclipsed a more general debate about the social consequences of his actions. Critics contended that Gibson was quietly moving the story away from the people and groups he had damaged by stressing his personal challenges. This left others believing that the confession lacked the required emphasis on the victims of his acts, thereby failing a genuine apology. Others saw the confession, though, as a sincere reflection of a guy attempting at atonement after reaching rock bottom. They cited Gibson's obvious discomfort with the media's obsession on his past and his openness to publicly confess his mistakes as proof he was really trying to take ownership. For these people, the confession was evidence that Gibson was striving toward personal development and had learned from his past. Regardless of how one interpreted the confession, it was clear that Gibson's past continued to shape his public image in significant ways. After years of public scandals, Mel Gibson's confession attracted a mixed bag of responses from the public as well as inside the entertainment business. On one side, some felt that his emphasis on personal recovery and admission of his previous misdeeds marked a road toward atonement. Performer Robert Downey Jr., among other supporters and business leaders, flocked to his rescue, arguing for a second shot for the troubled performer. Having conquered public battles with addiction, Downey Jr. personally supported Gibson's comeback to the forefront. therefore motivating Hollywood to pardon and welcome him once more. Still, the confession also ran under a lot of doubt. Critics claimed that Gibson's emphasis on personal hardships such as alcoholism, instead of squarely addressing the more general damage his racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic remarks caused, made the confession seem inadequate. Many in the business, including some producers and directors, stayed reluctant to collaborate with him due to worries about his ongoing presence in Hollywood scene progressively stressing diversity and inclusion. Gibson's revelation came at a time when he was actively trying to get back into filmmaking, most famously with the release of Hacksaw Ridge, which increased rumors that the timing was more calculated than sincere. As Gibson moved forward with his confession behind him, the question remained whether Hollywood and the public would ever fully accept his redemption. After years of public controversies, Mel Gibson's confession attracted a mixed bag of responses from the public as well as inside the entertainment business. On one side, some felt that his emphasis on personal recovery and admission of his previous misdeeds marked the road towards atonement. Performer Robert Downey Jr., among other supporters and business leaders, flocked to his rescue, arguing for a second shot for the troubled performer. Having conquered public battles with addiction, Downey Jr. personally supported Gibson's comeback to the forefront, therefore motivating Hollywood to pardon and welcome him once more. Still, the confession also ran under a lot of doubt. Critics claim that Gibson's emphasis on personal hardships, such as alcoholism, instead of squarely addressing the more general damages his racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic remarks caused, made the confession seem inadequate. Many in the business, including some producers and directors, stayed reluctant to collaborate with him due to worries about his ongoing presence in the Hollywood scene, progressively stressing diversity and inclusion. Gibson's revelation came at a time when he was actively trying to get back into filmmaking, most famously with the release of Hacksaw Ridge, which increased rumors that the timing was more calculated than sincere. Despite the mix of supportive and critical reactions, Gibson's confession did have significant long-term effects on his career trajectory and legacy. In the years following Gibson's confession, the long-term repercussions on his career and legacy began to take shape. On one side, his confession, along with his triumphant return as the director of Hacksaw Ridge, indicated that he still had the capacity to create critically praised films. Hacksaw Ridge was well hailed by reviewers and got many Academy Award nominations, indicating a potential turning point in Gibson's career. This accomplishment demonstrated that despite his past, there were still portions of Hollywood and public willing to divorce the artist from the controversy that had defined him for a decade. However, the confession did not totally repair Gibson's image. His legacy remains profoundly intertwined with the controversies of the 2000s, and many in the business continue to view him with caution. While he has found occasional work as both an actor and director in the years since his confession, Gibson is far from the omnipresent A-lister he once was. Major studios are still scared of the potential backlash connected with his name, and the prospects in the big-budget mainstream projects have been restricted. Gibson's career resurrection has mostly been relegated to smaller, independent productions or those with fewer financial concerns associated. In terms of his public impression, Gibson's confession helped him to ease some of the more immediate criticism, but it did not eradicate the stigma connected with his earlier conduct. For many, his apology came too late, and his prior words continue to plague his legacy. Even when his employment in Hollywood takes up again, his name is synonymous with controversy over whether he should ever be entirely forgiven. In the end, while Gibson's confession opened the door to some new opportunities, it has not completely restored his standing in Hollywood or his public image. Ultimately, Gibson's confession did make some beneficial improvements for his career, allowing him to re-enter Hollywood, albeit on a more limited scale. His excellent directing attempts, particularly with Hacksaw Ridge, indicated that his talent remained intact, and for some, this was enough to justify giving him another shot. However, the confession did not totally rehabilitate them in the eyes of many within the industry, or at the public at large. Gibson's career possibilities are hampered by the enduring impact of his conflicts, and while he may continue to find employment, his days as a major Hollywood figure seem to be done. The confession allowed Gibson a partial return, but his future in Hollywood will forever be shaped by the controversies of his past. A reflection on Mel Gibson's legacy. Mel Gibson's contributions to cinema are clear. Despite the problems that have plagued his career as both an actor and filmmaker, he has left a big imprint on Hollywood. Gibson first achieved international notoriety with his breakout appearance in Mad Max, followed by Gallipoli, which displayed his range and emotional depth. His career continued to soar during the 1980s and 1990s with blockbuster hits like the Lethal Weapon series and Braveheart. The latter not only reinforced his status as a Hollywood A-lister, but also marked his debut as a director, earning him 2 Academy Awards, including Best Director. Gibson's directorial work stands out for his ambition and audacity. Braveheart became a classic epic, influencing the historical drama genre. The historical drama genre with its sweeping scope and brutal action sequences. Later, The Passion of the Christ would generate both praise and controversy, as Gibson explored religious subjects with unflinching passion. The film was an economic success, generating over $600 million worldwide, and it became a cultural icon, sparking disputes surrounding its content and message. While Gibson's films often split audiences, his willingness to take risks and explore tough issues has had a lasting impact on the business, motivating younger directors to push limits. Despite his personal challenges, his achievements as both an actor and filmmaker have contributed complexity to Hollywood's narrative environment. Films like Apocalypto and Hacksaw Ridge further established his expertise in producing emotional, visually fascinating stories with a focus on human persistence. However, while his cinematic achievements remain highly regarded, the complexities of Gibson's personal life complicate his legacy. The sharp contrast between Mel Gibson's public persona as a great actor and filmmaker and his private activities has long muddled his legacy. On television, Gibson personified characters that often struggled for justice, freedom, and integrity, making him an admired and captivating personality. However, his personal life, marred by acts of racism, misogyny, and anti-Semitism, exposed a far darker side that contradicted the public's impression of him. For many, it is impossible to reconcile the creativity of Gibson's filmography with the guy behind the camera. His outbursts and public scandals have left a lasting taint in his reputation, forcing the public and Hollywood to confront an issue that has grown increasingly frequent in the modern age. Can we separate the artist from their art? In Gibson's case, this conflict is more pronounced given that his controversies touch on core problems of racism, misogyny, and religious intolerance, making forgiveness and atonement a complex, frequently controversial subject. Some say that his contributions to cinema should stand on their own, that his corpus of work displays the brilliance of an artist who altered Hollywood's storytelling landscape, feel that his detrimental activities overshadow his cinematic successes, leaving his legacy forever stained. His films remain in high regard, but they are generally regarded through the lens of his personal controversies. Ultimately, Gibson's legacy is one of both artistic triumph and personal failure, forever entangled in the complexities of fame and human imperfection. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Mel Gibson's controversial career, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And if you're ready for more Hollywood secrets and stories, click on the next video now.